the crack of a bat, the whistle of a locomotive, two sounds that defined an era. In the 19th century, as the United States expanded westward, baseball was becoming the national pastime, and the railroads' miles of steel stretching across mountains, rivers, and plains were the lifeblood that carried the game into every corner of the country. Baseball and railroads, two American stories, forever intertwined. In the 1840s, baseball was still a regional game, played by clubs in New York, New Jersey, and a handful of other cities. At the same time, railroads were beginning to transform America, connecting towns and industries, shrinking distances that once seemed impossible to cross. By the 1850s, both the sport and the railroads were surging forward, and soon, their paths would converge. The Civil War of the 1860s spread baseball across the country as soldiers played in camps. And when the war ended, the railroads, many built by the labor of those same men, were ready to carry the game beyond the East Coast. Teams could now travel farther, faster, and more safely than ever before. Baseball was no longer a neighborhood pastime. It was becoming a national sport. In the year 1871, the National Association of Professional Baseball Players was formed. Teams from Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and beyond needed reliable ways to play each other. The answer was the railroad. Every schedule was built around train routes. Every rivalry was shaped by the steel rails that connected America's growing cities. By 1876, the National League had been born. Its founders understood one truth: the railroad was their greatest ally. Teams like the Chicago White Stockings and the St. Louis Brown Stockings could only exist because trains carried them across vast distances, linking the Midwest to the East. The rhythm of baseball, the long seasons, the pennant chases, was set by the rhythm of the railroad timetable. Players lived on trains, they ate in dining cars, slept in Pullman sleepers, and spent long nights staring out at endless landscapes of fields and towns. For them, the train was more than transportation, it was home. A rolling clubhouse where victories were celebrated, defeats were mourned, and bonds were forged. It wasn't only players who traveled. Fans, too, used railroads to follow their teams. Special baseball excursions carried thousands of supporters to rival cities. In 1886, St. Louis fans boarded trains to Chicago for championship games. By the turn of the century, entire sections of ballparks were filled with fans who had come in on trains that morning, their chants echoing the sounds of the rails. As railroads pushed west, so did baseball. Towns like Denver, Omaha, and Kansas City developed minor league clubs, sustained by rail travel. The Pacific Coast League, founded in 1903, depended entirely on the rails. Teams journeyed thousands of miles up and down the coast, from Seattle to Los Angeles, in grueling but unforgettable trips. From the 1890s through the 1930s, the golden age of railroads matched the golden age of baseball. Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson all traveled the country by train. Ruth, larger than life, was known to lean out of train windows to greet fans at every stop. Cobb carried his intensity onto the rails, clashing with teammates in cramped compartments. Every great player of that era knew the rattle of the rails, as well as the roar of the crowd. For journalists, trains were a stage. Reporters traveled with teams, filing stories from dining cars and sharing gossip overheard in sleeper berths. The legend of baseball was carried not just on the field, but in the conversations that flowed along the tracks. The railroad made baseball not only a sport, but a narrative shared by an entire nation. But the railroad age also carried dangers. Teams endured delays, breakdowns, even accidents. In 1903, the St. Louis Browns survived a train wreck that could have been fatal. Players learned to live with uncertainty, knowing that every journey carried risk. Yet, the game went on, and the trains kept rolling. The Great Depression of the 1930s strained both railroads and baseball. Passenger numbers fell. Teams struggled to make ends meet. Yet the bond remained. Even in hard times, railroads carried the game forward, ensuring baseball remained a national pastime. By the 1940s, a new challenger emerged. Air travel. At first, teams resisted. Trains were reliable, familiar, and woven into the culture of the game. But after World War II, the jet age began, and by the 1950s, teams increasingly took to the skies. By the 1960s, baseball's romance with the railroad was fading. Schedules now demanded faster travel. Expansion into California made flying essential. The great trains that once carried Ruth and Cobb gave way to airplanes that carried Mantle and Mays. The age of the rails was ending. But the story doesn't end there. The bond between baseball and the railroad left a permanent mark. Ballparks were often built beside tracks. Teams' identities were shaped by the rhythm of the rails. Even today, echoes remain in the names of clubs like the Reading Fight and Phils, and in the whistle of a passing train that can still be heard from certain ballparks. Baseball and railroads grew together, defined each other, and built the rhythms of American life. And yet, the moment the trains left the game, baseball began to change. The schedules grew longer, the distances greater, and the connection between fans and teams, perhaps, more fragile. The The question remains, what did baseball lose when it left the rails behind?